This is Eileen Griffin with the Heartland View from the Heartland Daily News, bringing you information and analysis about breaking public policy stories and events that affect your life, your health, your freedoms, and the nation's economy. So this week we're going to start with a high-level overview of some economic information and data, and then we're going to go right into our feature story, which I think you'll find interesting. So economic data. Last quarter looked really good. There was a soaring economy going through first quarter and heading into the second quarter. Second quarter likely to continue this pace. Consumer spending continues to be high. Now remember, a lot of that consumer spending is due to those stimulus checks. So there's still a lot of Americans out there with a stimulus check burning a hole in their pocket, and they're out buying things. So that's some of what we're seeing out there. Now the ongoing unprecedented strength in economic demand will continue to result in shortages and upward pressure on prices. So look for inflationary pressures to continue to build. On the spending front, several new initiatives proposed by President Biden come with a hefty price tag. The stimulus plan plus the infrastructure plan and expansive new policies will increase an already rapidly growing budget. 4 years ago, the entire federal budget was $4 trillion. Last year, it was $6.6 trillion. And there's no end in sight. An election's coming, and people do like free stuff. So it's hard not to promise things when you have the ability to do so. But these government handouts are not without cost. In short, higher taxes. So we're going to cover a story from Judge Andrew Napolitano along these same lines, and he calls it an unconstitutional tsunami of debt that will harm the economy for decades. So Napolitano writes that the repayment of all this debt spending will have seriously unpleasant consequences for future generations of Americans. Under the Biden administration, the feds will borrow 3 times what they collect in taxes. President Biden has asked Congress to raise taxes and increase borrowing so his administration can spend $2.3 trillion on top of the $1.9 trillion that Congress authorized 2 months ago for COVID relief. For thousands of projects he calls infrastructure and all of these other government programs that he's proposing, this is going to just continue to add trillions of dollars to the budget. In recent history, this has been a bipartisan problem. It's not one party or the other. Both parties have been loading up on debt. Yet, what Biden wants to do is the most massive peacetime transfer of wealth in history, and none of it authorized by the Constitution. So who's going to pay for all of this? Well, the pain goes further and deeper than we might imagine. So we talk about corporate taxes, and President Biden has proposed a tax on corporations. Well, corporations employ people. They employ lots of people. So they employ everything from accountants and clerks to engineers to marketers and salespeople. All those people that work at the corporations will in some way or another potentially be impacted by this corporate tax. What about the capital gains tax? That's another proposal, changing how the capital gains tax works. Well, increasing capital gains tax impacts investors. So investors have to weigh out the risk-reward. So if the reward's going to go down, they're going to reevaluate the level of risk they're willing to take in the market as all of these changes happen to capital gains tax. Judge Napolitano says, quote, that members of both parties, both major political parties, favor this unbridled borrowing and spending approach to government that's unconstitutional and destructive is not surprising. Giving away cash and pushing the cost onto non-voters, generations as yet unborn, can make members of Congress popular. It can also turn the public treasury into a public trough. Thomas Jefferson warned of the dangers of this as it would become habit-forming for politicians, and voters would grow to expect it. So, is there anybody fighting for fiscal responsibility? Anybody standing up and saying, that's an awful lot of money. Maybe we need to pull back and take another look at this? Well, apparently there is. So Senator Tim Scott, the Republican from South Carolina, had a response to President Biden's presentation, to his speech recently, and he did speak on behalf of a group of other Republicans that would like to have some fiscal restraint. So during this speech that Biden recently had, he discussed his $1.8 trillion spending plan to pay for all of these new programs. He talked about this capital gains increase and raising the highest marginal tax rates, other things that will impact everyday Americans. So far, Biden has requested $6 trillion in spending from Congress and several tax increases to pay for it in total. So after Biden's speech, Senator Scott, addressing these spending proposals, said, quote, even more taxing, even more spending, to put Washington even more in the middle of your life from cradle to college. The beauty of the American dream is that families get to define it for themselves. we should be expanding opportunities and options for all families, not throwing money at certain issues because Democrats think they know best. End quote. Republican Representative Jim Jordan from Ohio said, quote, socialism is slow motion. Get ready, America. President Biden is going to raise your taxes. End quote. So be prepared for more spending, more excessive spending, and unfortunately, higher taxes. Now for our feature story this week. This is interesting. So an Amazon location in Bessemer, Alabama was offered the opportunity to become unionized, and they turned it down. So employees at the Amazon warehouse decided they don't want to be unionized. Only 16% of those eligible to vote voted in favor of the union. Now, this disinterest in unionization is not new in the private sector. We've seen this trend going on for quite some time. So it is interesting that it's becoming bigger and more significant, but at the same time, the federal government is trying to find ways to help unions. So why would they need to do that? Well, with easy availability of compensation data online, access to all kinds of information, communication channels are now open electronically, you can reach different levels of management. A lot of employees feel that they can do their own communicating. They can get to who they need to, and they can get the information, different sources to try to have these conversations. So unions are just not as attractive to most employees as they once were. Private sector union membership has dropped down to 6.3% from 24.2% in 1973. So the only place that union membership is growing is in the public sector. So Pudzer suggests the loss in Alabama could be the number of workers who tend to be Republican. And it also might have been disconcerting to a lot of these workers in Alabama that the union representatives brought Senator Bernie Sanders to represent them and to encourage them to vote for the union. But Pudzer says Americans don't want socialism, particularly Republican workers, where nearly 80% of them view capitalism very positively. According to OpenSecrets.org, labor organizations contributed $27.5 million to President Joe Biden's campaign and groups that supported him, while President Trump received only $360,000. So, to help their union allies, the Democrat-controlled House of Representatives passed this called Protecting the Right to Organize Act, or the ProAct. So the ProAct is going to allow union organizers access to employees' personal information, where they live and where their children go to school. It's also going to change the voting process so it's no longer confidential. They'll have the right to know who voted for them and who voted against them. And if a business did have the votes to unionize, the ProAct would then compel union membership by eliminating the laws that currently exist in 27 states that grant workers the right to work, meaning they have the choice to not join the union and not have to pay union dues. So workers will be intimidated into voting in favor of unionization, and then even in right to work states, all employees will lose that right and will now be part of the ProAct's requirement that everybody participates in a union and pays dues. And again, we'll remind you, $27.5 million of union dues went to the Biden campaign, while $360,000 to the Trump campaign. So Pudzer says, quote, what workers of all political stripes do want is more opportunity, better wages, and better working conditions. It might help the unions if they focus on those things rather than spending union dues on candidates many other members and potential members oppose, or bringing in an 80-year-old socialist to give the same unconvincing speech he's been giving for the last 50 years. If union leaders want to change, they should try winning worker support by meeting their needs without offending their values. End quote. And that's the report. That's this week's Heartland View. I wanted to make a comment about comments. So I see comments on some of the postings on the comment board. Very nice to see that. I wanted to thank you for that. I wanted to thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for sharing it with other people. We appreciate that. Please continue to do so. If you like us on social media and share it with your friends. If you'd like to see the full details of a lot of these stories, there's a lot of depth to most of them. Please check it out, heartlanddailynews.com. And if you'd like to support the organization that puts out this information and tries to keep you informed, please go to our website, heartland.org. You can make a donation right on the website. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Have a great week.